Emily Carter's haven was Central Park. She frequently sat beneath the huge oak trees on the same weathered bench. She listened to the distant laughing of children and the symphony of birds as her face turned to the breeze. Rex, her devoted German Shepherd guiding dog, had a leather leash in her hand. Rex was not merely her friend. 5 years ago, she lost her sight in a car accident, yet he was her lifeline, her eyes, and her guardian. Rex felt restless in spite of the quiet surroundings. His keen eyes scanned the park as if expecting harm, and his ears perked at every sound. Amidst a handful of leather-clad motorcycle riders, Jaxon McCoy was leaning against his motorcycle across the park. Jaxon had an attention-grabbing appearance with his large stature, shaved head, and tattoos. He saw Rex beside Emily, who was sitting quietly. It was something about her calm manner and the dog's orderly position that annoyed him. Jaxon grinned and flicked his cigarette on the floor. "Take a look at that." As his companions laughed behind him, he scowled and moved away from his bike, like a princess with her ideal little puppy. Crossing the park, Jaxon headed directly toward Emily, his big boots thudding on the pavement. Rex was the first to notice him. A deep growl rumbled from the dog's chest, causing his body to tense and his ears to perk up. Emily cocked her head toward the sound of the approaching footsteps, sensing the tightness in the leash. "Hello there," Jaxon remarked sarcastically, his tone brimming with irony. "You have a nice puppy. Is he a magician? He might be able to turn over or leap through hoops for us." Emily's heartbeat accelerated as she tightened her hold on Rex's leash. She could hear the hate in the man's voice even if she couldn't see him. With a hard tone that concealed the anxiety that was brewing inside of her, she said, "Leave us alone." Jaxon, however, did not retreat. Instead, in an attempt to agitate Rex, he loudly clapped his hands. The dog's snarl grew, but he stayed motionless, his sharp eyes fixed on Jaxon. "Well, tough dude, eh?" Jaxon took a step closer and taunted. A few onlookers had stopped to observe the event by this point, but nobody ventured to go in. Jaxon chose to up the stakes after noticing the attention. As though to kick Rex, he lifted his foot. "Don't you dare," Emily shouted as the shepherd's growl turned into a deep, guttural warning. Jaxon was unaware that Rex wasn't your typical dog. Rex was a K-9 military service dog before he became Emily's guide. He was trained for high-risk missions and could defeat enemies much bigger than this man. Rex's instincts from years of military training came flooding back as Jaxon's foot approached. His muscles stiffened, and he never took his eyes off the attacker. As everyone waited to see what would happen next, the park fell silent and the tension in the air increased. As he lifted his foot higher, Jaxon's laughter reverberated across the park, evidently relishing the tension he was generating. He hissed, "Come on, mutt, show me what you've got." Emily's knuckles whitened as her fingers grew tighter around Rex's leash. Even though she couldn't see what was happening, there was a menacing, electric tension in the air. But Rex stayed motionless, his body as taut as a coiling spring. His growls had deepened, alerting Jaxon to the possibility that this may be his final error. The little group that had assembled stood motionless, uncertain whether to step in or not. While some anxiously murmured, others had their phones out, recording the altercation. A woman whispered that someone ought to stop him, but nobody came forward. Emily cried out once more, "Leave us alone, he's not just a dog," her voice breaking with despair. Although he will defend himself, Jaxon's confidence was further bolstered by her admonition. He sneered, "Defend yourself, he's just a big lapdog. Take a look." The German Shepherd jumped into action as Jaxon surged forward, his foot pointed at Rex. Rex sidestepped the kick with a quickness that left everyone in disbelief and let out a harsh, commanding bark that echoed throughout the park. With a single seamless motion, Rex positioned himself between Emily and Jaxon, his eyes fixed on the man and his sharp teeth exposed. This was not how a typical dog would behave. It was the reaction of an expert, a guardian who had been taught to eliminate dangers. The intensity emanating from Rex took Jaxon by surprise, and he staggered backward. Everything froze for an instant. Emily gripped Rex's leash, feeling the tension in the air and the vibrations of his movement. She was aware of the alteration. "Rex," she said in a tremulous voice. The dog didn't give her a second glance. His whole attention was on Jaxon, prepared for anything that might happen. In contrast, Jaxon had stopped laughing. His self-assured smile had vanished, to be replaced by a glimmer of discomfort. "What on earth is wrong with this dog?" His tone changed from mockery to uncertainty as he murmured. A man wearing a park ranger outfit eventually forced his way through the muttering mob, with phones recording every second. "What's happening?" His voice was forceful as he requested. When Jaxon realized he was now the target of unwelcome attention, his bluster vanished and he froze. Rex remained motionless, his body language indicating it. The results would not be favorable to Jaxon if he attempted anything again. The strain in Rex's leash eased a little when Emily let out a shaky breath, but she knew the danger was not yet over. Jaxon stepped back cautiously, his hands up a little as though to minimize what he was doing. "I was just playing around, so relax." He mumbled, "The dog is overreacting," but his voice lacked the assurance it had a few seconds earlier. With a harsh expression, the park ranger, who was now positioned between Jaxon and Emily, crossed his arms. "Is threatening a guide dog considered teasing? It goes beyond being careless. It's against the law." Emily, still shaking, held on to Rex's leash. But Rex was still standing squarely in front of her, staring at Jaxon with fierce intensity. There was a noticeable sense of tension in the air, which was made worse by the crowd's whispering. The ranger went on, his tone hard but steady. "This dog is defending her as part of his job. Furthermore, it appears that he is more skilled at his work than you are at being a decent person." As the ranger's comments hit home, Jackson's smirk completely vanished. In the meantime, Rex was still growling, and Emily's fingers reached down to touch his head out of habit. "Good boy," she whispered. Rex, trembling but grateful in her voice. Everyone in the vicinity of them watched in silence, with some taking phone recordings and others whispering in low voices. Then an elderly guy moved forward, his voice cutting through the whispering, his weathered military cap gleaming in the sunlight. The man added in a calm but certain tone, "That's no ordinary dog." He pointed right at Rex, his face worn with years of experience. "Anywhere, I can recognize that dog's stance." Even Jaxon appeared surprised as the crowd gasped. Emily turned to face the man, her brow furrowed in perplexity. "What are you saying?" Her voice barely above a whisper, she tightened her grasp on Rex's leash and whispered, "He's my guide dog." Slowly, the man nodded as he moved closer. "I'm willing to wager that he has served before becoming your guide dog, ma'am. Only a trained military dog possesses that level of focus and bark." Like a wave, the realization struck Emily. As though viewing Rex in a new light, she knelt next to him and ran her fingers through his thick fur. "Rex," she whispered, her voice shaking with wonder and shock. Although she had always knew Rex was unique, she had no idea his past had such significance. With a steady yet respectful tone, the man went on. "He and other dogs are heroes. They are prepared to defend soldiers and eliminate dangers in war zones. He must perceive that individual as a threat if he is acting in this way." He looked sharply at Jaxon, and the biker shifted uneasily, his confidence eroding even further. Jaxon had lost all of his bluster. His shoulders slumped as he took another step back. His voice was scarcely heard as he mumbled, "I didn't know." With an uncompromising tone, the ranger took a step toward him. "Being ignorant does not justify your behavior. You're fortunate that this dog was restrained." At last, Rex relaxed a little, but he continued to watch Jaxon as though to make sure the man didn't do anything else. With her heart still racing from processing what she had just learnt, Emily let out a shaky gasp. Rex was the center of attention for the throng, which was now vibrating with wonder. He was now seen by them as a warrior rather than merely a guiding dog. The park ranger gave Jaxon a look that was both authoritative and repulsive. He yelled, "You're done here," and motioned for the man to go. However, Jaxon paused, his eyes darting uneasily between Rex and the elderly man who had recognized the dog's actual identity. Someone yelled, "Call the cops," as the crowd's whispers became more audible. With his tough guy persona breaking under the pressure of public scrutiny, Jaxon muttered curses. Even though Rex seemed a little more at ease, he maintained his position, keeping his gaze fixed on Jaxon like a sentry ready to strike if needed. The world seemed to be spinning around Emily. A military dog, Rex? The elder man's comments, the battle zones, the soldiers, and the threats kept repeating in her head. She knelt next to Rex and caressed his fur, her fingers shaking. As though attempting to reach a hitherto unknown aspect of him, she muttered quietly, "Rex." He cocked his head slightly in her direction, his gaze briefly softening before returning his attention to Jaxon. She felt a surge of passion at the unflinching loyalty in his eyes. For years, she had trusted this dog with her life. Who was it? The older man moved nearer once more, his face pleasant yet serious. "You should be aware, ma'am, that dogs like him don't simply forget their training. Buried deep, it awaits the time when they are needed. He also believed that you needed him today." Emily gulped forcefully as her eyes pricked with tears. She recalled all the times Rex had appeared extra protective or watchful. His bark had always halted her in her tracks. He had always been her mentor, but now she understood that he had been so much more. Jaxon's suffering, meantime, became intolerable. He backed away and mumbled, "Okay, okay. I had no malicious intent. It didn't sit well with the park warden." "You don't have to decide that," he yelled. "You've accomplished plenty already." With his shoulders slumped, Jaxon headed toward the exit, the ranger trailing closely behind to make sure he didn't turn around. Slowly, the gathering started to thin out, but some people lingered, still obsessed with Emily and Rex. The elder man hung around too, observing Rex with a respectful expression that said 1,000 words. Emily stayed on the bench with her hand on Rex's back as the last mutterings of the audience subsided. She whispered, her voice cracking a little, "You've always been my protector, but I never knew how far you'd go for me." Now that he was steady and at ease, Rex sat next to her, looking around the park to make sure the threat had passed. The park no longer felt like a haven to Emily. She felt as though she had found a truth there that would alter her perception of Rex and herself for all time. That night, Emily sat on the edge of her tiny couch and gazed at Rex, who was lying close to her feet. The events of the day, including Jaxon's violence, the park ranger's intervention, and, above all, the disclosure of Rex's past, flashed through her head like a tornado. She hesitated and went for her laptop, her fingers lingering over the keys. What could she possibly look for? The phrase, "military canine history," finally sprang to her head, but she wasn't sure where to begin. Her knowledge about Rex grew as she read innumerable articles and anecdotes. These canines were soldiers in every way, they weren't just trained. They learned how to recognize danger, defend their handlers, and maintain composure under duress. All the details were in line with Rex's behavior that day, but they also sparked suspicion. What had happened to him? With whom had he served? How did he come to be with her? Emily felt a mixture of pride and sorrow at the idea of Rex putting his life at jeopardy. She shut down the laptop and slipped down to sit next to Rex. She talked softly while running her fingers through his thick fur. "Rex, you've always had my trust, but now I know why you're so much more than I ever imagined. You've experienced a lot, haven't you?" Her voice made Rex's ears perk up, and he leaned toward her touch. Emily experienced a bond beyond reliance for the first time. Rex's quiet fortitude and steadfast devotion created a connection with her. The following day, Emily decided. Explaining the situation and wondering if there was any way to find out more about Rex's past, she called the local veterans organization. The woman on the other line said she would investigate. According to her, a lot of retired K9s are put in other positions like therapy or guiding. It's a means of providing them with a purpose following their service. Emily's chest grew constricted. Goal. Now that word had a lot of weight. Rex had been handed to her for more than simply assistance. In ways she couldn't even understand, he had been saving her. Emily crouched down next to Rex once again as the call came to an end. With a little smile, she continued, "We'll work it out together." Rex waggled his tail a little, his serene manner exuding ease. Whatever they found, she was convinced of one thing. Rex was more than simply her mentor. He was her hero, her companion, and her protector. Even though the park event had happened a week ago, Emily's suspicions about Rex's history persisted. Every silence reminded her of what the elder guy had said. "It's a K9. He has combat training." Although Emily had always known Rex was unique, she was now aware of how little she actually understood about him. She felt obligated to him to comprehend the life he had led before to their meeting, even if she had become reliant on his direction. Her phone chimed one afternoon as she was getting ready to take Rex for their regular stroll. Emily's heart thumping, she hurriedly answered the unknown number on the screen. A woman stated, "This is Karen from the Veterans Organization, Ms. Carter. I discovered some details regarding your dog." As Karen described, Emily held her breath. Bravo is a retired K9 who has the same military ID as your dog. Alongside Sergeant Jake Carter, a handler, he served abroad. Before Bravo retired, they served on several missions. Emily felt a chill as she heard Rex called Bravo. "Bravo," she said again, almost incredulously. Karen went on to say that Sergeant Carter currently resides in Montana after retiring a few years ago. "I can provide you his contact details if you like. You might be able to learn more about Bravo's service from him." Emily's hands were shaking as she wrote down the specifics. Rex was laying at her feet, calm and alert, when the call ended. "Bravo," she muttered. The name was burdensome, laden with a past she couldn't fathom. Emily was sitting on her couch that night, looking at her phone. She had often practiced her response to Sergeant Carter, but she was too nervous to dial. What if contacting him brought up unpleasant memories again? What if he was unwilling to discuss Bravo? Then Emily turned to face Rex, who had stood at her side for years. She had a duty to him to piece together his story. Pulling herself together, she hit the call button. A thick, gravelly voice responded after the line rung twice. "Hi there." Emily's nerves pricked at the sound, but she composed herself. "Is Sergeant Jake Carter here?" "I'm Emily Carter, and I believe I have Bravo, your former dog." After a lengthy silence, Emily questioned whether the line had died. Then Jake's voice returned, full of passion. "Are you serious, Bravo? I believed I would never hear from him again." As Emily heard the emotion in Jake's voice, tears filled her eyes. She said, "He's been with me for a few years now. It was only recently that I learned about his past. I cannot even begin to describe how he has saved my life." Jake's breath came out shakily. "More times than I can remember, he also saved mine. I must see him." Emily realized then that this was only the start of a new chapter for Rex and the man who had been his best friend, not only for her. After Emily's call with Sergeant Jake Carter, the days seemed to drag on forever. Jake had demanded to see Bravo by plane as soon as possible. Although Emily made an effort to concentrate on her everyday activities, the prospect of their meeting filled the air with a nervous energy because she now knew him. She pondered Rex's reaction. Would he recall Jake? Would their relationship change as a result of their reunion? As she readied herself for the emotional day ahead, the questions swirled in her head. Emily waited outside her tiny apartment with Rex on the afternoon of Jake's arrival. Rex adjusted his weight, sensing her uneasiness, and she felt the leash tremble slightly in her hands. "Everything will work out," she said, Rex, not quite sure if she was comforting herself or him. She heard the door bang as the car came up. A few moments later, she heard Jake's booming voice. "Emily," he exclaimed, his voice tinged with both anticipation and fear. Emily gave a tense smile. "I'm Emily, yes." With a tiny catch in her voice, she indicated this to Rex. "Bravo is this?" Rex's ears pricked up at the mention of his former moniker. Jake hesitated for a second, staring at the dog. He knelt down slowly and held out a hand. His voice trembled as he said, "Hey there, boy. Remember me?" Rex's body tensed, he stood motionless. As the second dragged on, Emily's breath caught. Then Rex stepped forward gingerly and sniffed Jake's extended hand. At first, the change was hardly noticeable, but it eventually occurred. Rex whined softly and his tail started to wag. As Jake stretched out to give the dog's head a gentle pat, tears welled up in his eyes. "Do you not remember?" Jake muttered. Emily's own tears began to rise up as she heard the emotion in his voice. Rex had always been precious to her. However, realizing the bond between him and Jake deepened that comprehension. When the three of them entered, Jake told tales of their military days together. "On every mission, Bravo was my partner," he explained. "More times than I can remember, he saved my life. He had no fear. However, I never imagined seeing him again." As Jake described their relationship, Emily listened carefully, her fingers grazing Rex's fur. Jake's stories, however, were rife with peril and sacrifice. In every phrase, Emily could sense his respect and affection for Rex. Jake knelt next to Rex one last time that night as he was getting ready to go. "Boy," he replied, "you've got a good life now." His voice was full with passion. "There is no one I could have asked to look after you." At his words, Emily's chest constricted. Jaxon you," she murmured quietly, "for entrusting me with him." Jake got up and smiled slightly at her. "He's in the proper location." Emily glanced down at Rex as he left. She whispered, "You've gone through so much. But you're home now, whatever that means." Following Jake's visit, Emily found herself wondering about Rex, or Bravo, as Jake had nicknamed him, incessantly. The tales of Rex's valor in battle, his ability to think quickly under duress, and his loyalty in the face of peril depicted a dog who had experienced said more than most people could fathom. It made her sad and amazed. Each time she felt him lead her across the street or caressed his fur, she couldn't help but wonder how much of his prior trauma contributed to his loyalty. After the event with Jaxon, Emily had avoided going to the quieter area of the park, so one afternoon she made the decision to take Rex there. That day was still fresh in my mind. It felt different now, though. Rex was no longer merely her guiding dog in her eyes. He was a warrior who had decided to trust her, and she saw him as a guardian. She spoke sweetly to him as they strolled along the walkway. "I hope you understand how much I value you. However, you have helped a great number of people. And you continue to choose to spend each day with me." Rex nudged her leg gently in response, as though he knew. Grinning, Emily took a seat on a bench and allowed him to lie at her feet. Except for the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the park was silent. Emily was at peace for the first time in weeks. But then she remembered something Jake had said when he was there. He remembers his training. It's waiting, always there. Did Rex ever miss that life, she wondered. The thrill, the risk, the unwavering goal. Emily made the decision to get in touch with Jake once more later that night. She was interested in learning more about Rex's past and how to respect it. She said on the phone, "Jake, you told me something that has been on my mind a lot. Rex, do you think Bravo really does miss his former life?" Jake answered after a delay on the other end. In his own way, he might. Dogs like him, however, are not stuck in the past. Their people are their life. And you are his mission at the moment, Emily. She thought about those remarks long after the call was over. His mission is you. Rex was always considered by Emily as her lifeline, guiding her through an invisible world. She now understood, however, that their relationship went beyond simple reliance. It was reciprocal. In the same way that Rex had given her the courage to start living her life again, she had given him a reason. In every way possible, it was a partnership. "I'll make sure you know how much you're loved, Rex," Emily whispered as she sat next to him on the floor that evening. Rex leaned into her every day, his warmth bringing her back to the present. There was nothing more reassuring to Emily than knowing that they would overcome any obstacles together. As the weeks went by, Emily discovered that she was coming to terms with her relationship with Rex on a deeper level. Their bond was strengthened rather than altered by his past. She reflected on the struggles he had faced, both in combat and adjusting to this new existence, each time he led her across the street or pushed her away from danger. However, one persistent notion kept her up at night. Was she really granting him the life he so richly earned? While enjoying her coffee one morning, Emily stumbled upon an article about retired military dogs. It explained how many dogs found it difficult to acclimate after they were off the field. Some dogs become agitated or despondent in the absence of the rigorous training regimen, yearning for a feeling of direction. Rex was lying quietly at Emily's feet when she glanced down at him. He didn't appear agitated. What if, however, she was not seeing the signs? Her heart ached at the thought that Rex might be secretly wishing for more. Emily started looking into methods to improve Rex's life since she was determined to make sure he was genuinely happy. She discovered that retired service dogs could participate in activities that mimicked their previous training in programs created just for them. She gave one of these groups a call that afternoon and told them Rex's story. The caller was a vivacious woman. "We would be delighted to assess Rex," she stated. "There is more to these programs than just exercise. Giving dogs a sense of fulfillment is their goal. He seems to flourish here as well." Emily and Rex showed up to the facility the next week. There were large fields, obstacle courses, and small groups of retired dogs working side by side with their handlers on the expansive property. As soon as they entered the gate, Rex became alert, his tail wagging slightly and his ears forward. The joy in his motions was palpable to Emily. She pondered for the first time whether this was what he had been lacking. A trainer came over with a kind smile. She knelt down to welcome him, saying, "This must be Bravo. See what he can recall." Rex was led through a sequence of exercises that included smell recognition, tracking, and agility. From a nearby bench, Emily observed. As she saw him come to life, moving with a confidence and accuracy she had never seen before, her chest constricted. It seemed as though a previously unconscious aspect of him was now completely conscious. Her face lit up with adoration as the trainer gave it back. "He's amazing," she said. "He never seemed to leave the field." Emily nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and a sense of regret. At home, that evening, Emily bent down next to Rex and petted his fur. "You're great." Her eyes were full of tears as she whispered. "I hope you never lose that aspect of yourself. We'll work together to determine what you need." Rex's steady presence reassured her as he leaned into her contact. The day had been enlightening for Emily. Rex was more than simply her mentor. His story was far from over, and he remained Bravo. Emily's life took on a new rhythm in the weeks after Rex's assessment at the training center. They went back to the center every Saturday, when Rex took part in exercises meant for retiring K9s. He obviously flourished in this setting, following scents, negotiating obstacle courses, and obeying orders with the accuracy of a dog in his prime. Emily was proud of him as she saw him move with purpose, but she also realized Rex's true nature. The trainer drew Emily aside one afternoon following yet another productive session. She said Rex is excellent. He is among the greatest K9s I have ever seen, not just a retired one. This degree of discipline and focus in a dog that has been out of service for so long is uncommon. Emily grinned, but her heart ached. Although she was aware that Rex enjoyed his job here, she was concerned about striking a balance between his and her requirements. Is he content, in your opinion? With hesitation, she asked. The trainer's face grew softer. For dogs like him, having a purpose is what makes them happy, and you contribute to that purpose, Emily. That night, sitting next to Rex in her tiny living room, Emily thought about those remarks. His presence was as reassuring as ever as he lay at her feet, breathing steadily. She reflected on everything he had done for her over the years, including his protection, advice, and steadfast devotion. She now understood that it was reciprocal. Previously, she had thought she was the one who relied on him. You've always been a hero, have you not? She stroked his fur and said. You're still watching out for me now. Shortly thereafter, Jake Carter called Emily. He welcomed her with a kind voice, and they discussed Rex's development for almost an hour. Jake laughed when Emily informed him about the training sessions. He remarked, that sounds like the Bravo I knew. Remember, nonetheless, that you are his greatest mission. Now you are his family. Long after the call ended, Emily continued to think about what he had said. Even though Rex's life had changed, his goal of keeping the people he loved safe was the same. Emily and Rex were walking in the park one evening when they came to a bench they knew well. Their lives had changed in that exact location weeks prior, when Rex's background was initially made public. Emily allowed the refreshing evening breeze to caress her as she sat. You've been through so much, she murmured quietly, with appreciation in her voice. But you've decided to stick by my side regardless of where you've been or what you've done. And I will always be grateful for that. Rex snuggled against her knee, his quiet strength grounding her as if he understood what she was saying. Emily made a quiet vow at that same moment. She would continue to pay tribute to Rex's history while creating a happy and loving future for him. Walking through life with a spouse as remarkable as Rex was the greatest privilege for Emily. A dog that has served as a fighter, a mentor, and most importantly, her constant companion.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.